Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Good, thank you. I like your studio.
Oh, thanks. I spent an awful lot of time in here.
Beats the one that I had. It was those. Oh, what was it? Like the tents that you take on.
Yes, the little portable ones. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, one of those. Loads of blankets.
Woof.
How's your day been?
Oh, it's been just fine. Just working. Bit of this
Yeah,
and bit of that.
yeah, definitely. I feel
How
like
about
it's
you?
yeah, just the same really. It's a bit one of those months, isn't it, where it's kind of back to it, but not quite back to it. Here and there, here and
Everybody's
there.
finding their footing.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's what happens when you start the new year. But yeah, what you been working on, if you can tell us.
I've been recording an audiobook, Primal Hunter Book 11, answering lots of emails, scheduling garage door repair. I need to
Amazing.
go, I need to
All the
go
fun
take my
stuff.
kid's car to the shop later.
Oh,
Just one of those days, a little bit of everything.
yeah, a little bit of everything. What's wrong with the car?
Well, he drove into a parked car, and so it's got to get the front right end repaired.
Fun. One of those days.
One of those days.
Yeah, I just want to say hi. I'm Neve. Nice to meet you. Um,
Hi.
big fan of the work. As is everybody here. So a lot of our clubs have been reading Legends and Lattes over either their December book or their January book. To amazing feedback. Well done.
Great.
um, no, we love it. And yeah, so just wanted to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about you. Yeah, get to know the process, get to know your thoughts and feelings behind it. Yeah, perfect.
You bet. You bet.
So I just wanted to say before we start, I mean the duology as a whole, I think we'll focus more on Legends and Lattes today, if that's all right, just because that's the book that everybody's been reading.
Just fine with me.
But I just wanted to start out by saying it's arguably one of the comfiest books I have ever read, especially a fantasy book. I feel like it's really rare for a fantasy book to just be so cozy and warm. Yeah, and I feel like especially with high fantasy, it's very easy to get lost unless you've kind of grown up reading it. But
Yeah.
and that just didn't happen at all, which was
I'm
amazing.
glad.
I love
I'm
that.
glad. Thank you.
And it also made me really hungry. Really
Yeah, I
hungry.
get a lot of that.
Yeah. I think I got maybe partway through, Thimble appeared, and I think I put the book down. I went to the shop, grabbed a pack of cinnamon rolls, came back
Yeah.
and carried it on. To start off, how would you describe Legends and Lattes to somebody who hasn't read it yet?
It is the story of an orc mercenary in her 40s who decides to retire from adventuring to open a coffee shop in a city that has never heard of coffee before.
Amazing. It's so unique as well. I think that's the thing. I remember when it first came out, I saw it listed on, I think it was on my Kindle, and I just downloaded it straight away because I was like, what?
What is this?
What? I was like, I love that. I love fantasy, I love coffee. I was going to make a cup of tea for the Q&A, but I thought I had to be on theme, and I have got coffee.
Yeah, I've got my coffee.
It is just instant though. I don't I wanted to be fancy, but I don't have the equipment. So.
We don't understand on ceremony.
You forgive me for that. So when you first came up with the concept, what came first? Was it the story or the characters?
First was probably just kind of in broad strokes the idea that what I wanted to do was it started as a joke. I wanted to I was joking that what I really wanted, the world was hanging fire, and all that I narrate is usually high action adventure stuff, the high stakes, you know. And I was joking that what I really wanted was a Hallmark movie set in a fantasy world. And so there was originally, it was just a joking idea, but when National Novel Writing Month rolled along and I decided to actually write, it's what I chose to do because I figured nobody would care if I didn't finish it, least of all me. And then it ended up not being a joke. I think that the concept of doing that kind of story came first. And then I think that Viv and the idea of doing it with coffee came more or less about the same time.
Mm.
I wanted a character that was very far from what I normally get to narrate, and very far from who you would expect to be opening a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And coffee was coffee felt like the thing that I was missing the most in the middle of COVID. I couldn't go to a coffee shop and get a cup,
Yeah.
and so those things just kind of happened at about the same time.
Amazing. And what came last, would you say? Was there any characters who you couldn't quite pin down until the final product?
Um, Honestly, as it went, I'm an outliner, and so I kind of know the characters as I'm outlining. I don't know that there was one that I struggled with particularly.
Mm.
Um, I I kind of end up starting with the voice more than anything else, so they kind of spring into my head pretty fully formed. That's not a really exciting answer, but there was often like an archetype that I was trying to fill. I knew I need a student that is doing the equivalent of using the Wi-Fi without buying anything, and that ended up being Hemington. But um, they usually kind of slotted into their roles pretty quickly.
I feel like we all know a Hemington. I've definitely been a Hemington, definitely during my uni days. It's just so relatable. I think that's the thing with this book, is that while it is very high fantasy in a way, the setting wise, it is so relatable. Every character you meet, you know exactly who they would be in your life.
I mean,
And
deliberately, it's supposed to be accessible, right? It's supposed to not hold you at arm's length, and people don't talk in fantasy language with lots of apostrophes, and it doesn't demand that 100 years of Orcish history to connect with any character. So, because it's cozy, you want the fantasy kind of has to come to you as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, definitely. I am. So you outlined everything. Would you say you outlined the plot in order, or were there bits that kind of fitted into place as you carried on writing?
It was just straight in order. I think that, for me, a story has to move one thing onto the next. Everything is a question that gets answered. So I don't really write things piecemeal. I write really linearly. I outline really linearly. And if you were to look at the outline, you would say, oh, yeah, that's the story. Um, there's still a lot of room for tone and little surprises as you go along, but the bones of the story are all there, and it's been that way for every book I've written so far. Even the third one. I did end up changing parts of the outline of the third one, but I changed them before I got to them. So
yeah, I think it's like when you have a plan, especially when I feel like it's something that's quite dear to you as well, it kind of just flows, doesn't it? It feels like a book that flows.
I'm glad it feels like it flows. It never feels like it flows when I'm writing. Writing for me feels very much like work. I very seldom get that, oh, I'm just writing and I'm carried away. And it always feels like I'm very deliberately putting down bricks. I wish I got that kind of like transcendent feeling. And I know a lot of authors that do. I'm a little jealous of it. On the plus side, I don't really have to change that much when it comes time to edit my book. I don't come back and say, gosh, this character has no purpose, or this middle 3 chapters have to be rewritten, or what a mess. So I guess that's my trade-off.
Kind of like the actual job aspect versus the story, I suppose.
Yeah. Most of my blue sky is like during the outlining, which is not maybe as cool of a time to blue sky.
No, I think it is. I feel like whenever I've thought of things, it's the actual writing part that is the most difficult, isn't it? To actually, I feel like, especially when you've got such a grand idea in your head and it's so clear to you, but how do you make it clear to other people, and how do you make it sound good, I suppose, as well?
I mean, you sit down to write, and for any given scene, I know what has to happen, but you could write it a million different ways. Is there a right one? I don't know. So there's a lot of second guess on your first instinct. Where am I starting in this scene? How am I going to kick this off? Any sentences, there's infinite possibilities, and guaranteed there's a better one than the one I picked. So some of it's just coming to the terms with the fact that maybe this isn't the best one that the world could possibly have seen, but it's the best one I've got available to me right now.
Um, like with what you did end up choosing and what you ended up writing, where would you say the how would I word this? In terms of the setting of the book,
Mm-hmm.
what inspiration did you take from, I don't know, like the real world or the literary world? Because you narrate audiobooks, so is there anything from that I know you said that helped to create the characters more so, or voice the characters, but was there anything that you took from that to kind of, oh, I think I would do something like this instead, or does that make sense?
I mean, the way I write now is very much informed by what I have read out loud, because it makes it really clear what you like and what you don't like, and
Yeah.
what words you want to read and what ones you don't. As far as like the setting and the world, the sort of stuff that it takes inspiration from, some of it's obviously kind of very Dungeons and Dragons adjacent, kind of like accessible European fantasy. I mean, there's a lot of, if you were to go get pictures of what the world of Legends and Lattes looks like, it's probably like French medieval. Um, and again, it's like trading on a lot of concepts that people kind of are familiar with, especially now when things like Critical Role are really popular and everybody's aware of what World of Warcraft is, and D&D is something that people did, as a social thing during COVID. And like as not, they didn't adventure. They all stopped and opened a bar because that's all everybody wanted to do at the end of their session. So I think it trades on a lot of those things. I made video games for decades, and they were often like fantasy action role-playing stuff. So I've been D&D adjacent for a really, really long time. And I read aloud a lot of fantasy. And when I pick up a book to read, it's often like speculative fiction. It's sci-fi, it's fantasy.
Definitely. I think when I first opened it, I mean, already with Viv being an orc, it is very D&D. I think that knowing like my love for D&D kind of fueled my love for the book. I think any kind of adjacent world, I could really easily picture the characters and picture who they were, and I don't know. I think so. With the D&D aspect, I think somebody's asked a question in the chat actually about it. Was there any particular element of Dungeons and Dragons that really made its way in?
I mean, I think what ultimately gets down to is that I think D&D ends up being a very modern approach to fantasy, because it's inhabited by people who are people that it's the people that you're around the table with, and they talk the way that modern people talk, and their idea of society and social norms is the ideas that modern people have about those things. And D&D, I think, of course, absorbs that, because it absorbs the players who are giving it life. So I think that that's kind of part of it. It's fantasy trappings, but it's a modern perspective, no matter how old the stuff in it is.
Yeah. I've never thought of it that way. I think that's such a beautiful way to describe the game and to describe the book as well. It's completely made up of the people around you. I think that's really nice. When it comes to the character building in itself, there were so many beautiful moments in the story. I mean, it was packed full of them. Personally, I'm obsessed with the Madrigal. Fabulous.
I like her too.
Yeah, she's great. As soon as she appeared, I was like, oh, I like you. She didn't even need to speak. She was just described. And I think I fell in love, fell completely in love. Was she always going to be like a hard-edged softie?
I think so, yeah, because the ultimate, she's basically Viv heading the other direction. She's somebody who started in something more normal and mundane and is heading another way. And I have a whole backstory for her, and she was going to feature a lot in the second book that I didn't write, when I wrote something else. But she's not a good person, but you can kind of see why she does the things she does. She's basically a gentrifier. But ultimately, a lot of people think that she's a softie, and that all Viv had to do was pay with cinnamon rolls, and she got what she wanted. But actually, to me, there's a lot more to it than that. It's that her investment is in changing this place. And so she's found someone who is going to change the way that this place is perceived, which ultimately probably makes her money. And that is really what the other end of the bargain is. I had more backstory to this, but it just didn't seem relevant to put it in the book, so I didn't. But yeah, I like the madrigal.
Yeah, I think she's fab. It's that thing, isn't it? She doesn't seem like anyone who would do something that wouldn't benefit her, but she does it in a way that you really root for her. I think in like the worst way possible. It's like she's not someone that you would ever want to meet or see in real life, and
Yeah,
the
you don't
real
really
life
want her entangled in your life at all.
No, and definitely like if you think of people like that in the world, they're the people that you absolutely hate, but there's something about her. You love a baddie. Everybody loves a baddie. With the jump from audiobooks to writing, so first of all, what inspired the change? Was it always something that you wanted to do? And second of all, how did you use anything that you take in terms of your process to audiobooks to writing, or was it just completely different?
I always wanted to write. I tried many times to write a novel and failed. So it was just kind of a long-held thing that I wanted to do, and I made many attempts. This just happened to be the first one that I actually finished. As far as process, I think a lot of it really just, I think there's unintentional changes to process, because I think now I hear what I write before I write it, which is a really nice kind of shortcut to letting you understand how prose is going to be delivered ultimately, because your brain gets rewired the more you read things out loud. You have a really strong interior voice. So that was definitely like part of, I'd say that's part of the process. The way I write is probably more informed by my previous job as a software engineer than anything else. I'm methodical. Things have to hold together. As soon as the foundation cracks, I have to repair it before I can build any further, because it's just the way that you build software. And I think it's useful, even though it doesn't sound very cool. And then, I think that's maybe I answered that.
No, you did. You definitely did. With the, so obviously you've had an insane career, may I point out. What an amazing career you've had. With the big three, so you've developed games, you do your audiobooks as well, you narrate audiobooks, and obviously you're an author. Which would you say is your favorite, if you have one?
It's really hard to, I like having written. That's my favorite. My favorite is already having written.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that writing is my favorite, although the actual day-to-day work is some of the hardest. But I like being done. Audiobooks are, I wouldn't give up audiobooks, because it's a lot easier to narrate someone else's work than it is to narrate your own. But it's also less yours. You're frosting somebody else's cake. Yeah. But I do really love it. Games were really good to me, but I will never go back. So I'll say writing, but with the caveat that day-to-day audiobooks are probably more pleasant.
Yeah. When it came to narrating Legends and Lattes, was it always going to be you?
Oh yeah, because initially I knew how it was supposed to sound. I knew I could narrate it, and I didn't need to go pay someone else to do it. I could just do it. So I figured I would narrate it from the get-go. And it's the easiest and most enjoyable narration that I ever do, because I don't have to ask anybody any questions, and I know exactly how everything's supposed to sound. So it's kind of great.
It's like it's almost like it was written for you.
It's weird.
I'm going to go to the chat actually for a couple of questions. This is for everyone watching as well. Feel free to pop some questions in the Q&A section, and we can ask them. So this is from Melissa. She says, "Hi Travis. Will Brigands and Bread Knives follow on chronologically from either Legends or bookshops? I'd really love it if we could see more from the adorable thimble."
It follows on from Legends. It happens a year or two after Legends. But the main character is Fern. So while I think I can safely say that Thimble appears and Viv appears and lots of familiar faces appear, it's not really about them, except kind of peripherally. But yeah, I won't spoil it. Anyway, the book's done, but
That's the thing, isn't it? I
see
can't.
how anybody receives it.
I just want to ask so much more about it, but we're not allowed yet. We're not allowed. We'll find out soon enough. I'm personally really excited. It feels like a book it was tied up so nicely, but the world is so beautiful that you instantly just want to go back. Like, I want to know about the dock workers, and I want to know more about just like the spice man. Everything.
Well, the third book is kind of a road trip book, so you get to see a lot more of the world. But it's also, I think, considerably less cozy than the other ones. So it has more action scenes than both of the others combined, even though the main character is a bookseller.
I think that's so fun. It's so, especially when you get to just kind of branch out into the world, because obviously we only see a very small section of this world that you have in your head. So going and exploring new places, I think that would be so interesting. I think it would be really, really cool. I mean, I'm sure you think so too. I would hope.
I'm really curious what people think. To
Yeah.
a certain extent, I dread it because it doesn't feel like exactly the same kind of book, which is what I want. I don't have any interest in writing the same thing over and over and having a template for here's what a cozy fantasy is, and I will just check these boxes.
Yeah.
But I'm also nervous. Viv's not the main character. A lot of people really love Viv. She's referenced plenty and she's in it, but it's not her book. So I'm nervous about that. I'm nervous that it's not a cozy book about small business ownership in a fantasy world, and that some people are going to be disappointed. I have no idea how people are going to receive it. Not a clue. And so I'm nervous.
Yeah. I think that's to be expected, isn't it? But I'm sure it'll be fabulous. I think you've kind of hooked everyone in now, and so everyone's along with you for the ride.
We'll see how it goes.
Nicole says, "Hi Travis, 2 questions. Who was your favorite character to write? Satchel is my fave, but I love them all. And secondly, will we find out more about Durius?"
So my favorite character to write is probably Viv, because she's the closest to me. She's always a straightforward, although I really did enjoy writing Fern, especially in this last book. My plan is for you to find out more about Durius. He was supposed to feature largely in the second book that I didn't write. And I hope I'm getting around to that. It didn't make sense to include him in book 3, but I thought about it. So ideally, yes.
Book 4 and 5, maybe. What else have we got? What does your typical writing routine look like?
Well, if I've actually made it a routine and it's not getting broken up by things I didn't expect. Initially, I'll have outlined the book and I will write a chapter a day until it is done. I will sit in this box that I'm sitting in right now and write a chapter every day until it's done. That did not go as planned for this third book. It's a hard book to write, and I had a lot of upheaval throughout the year and a lot of travel and things that took me longer to do than I expected. But that's theoretically how it should work and how it worked on the previous 2 books.
Yeah, I really admire that. I am notoriously, I both love structure and find structure so hard to follow. I need structure forced upon, I think, rather than being able to actually stick to it myself. So I rate that. I admire that a lot. I'm going to ask one more from the audience before I get back to this, and then we'll come back. So it says, "Hey Travis, I second the question above. I need to know more about Durius. He fascinated me so much."
Yeah, my plan was to have him be he and Amity were going to kind of paddle around together, and that he would be involved, and you find a little bit more about why he works the way that he works. But he's largely located around Thun, so I kind of have to spend time in Thun to do that. So, well, at least mostly. Yeah, I don't know if I can say much more.
No, I know. That's the hard part, isn't it? I think it's just so fascinating. I loved Amity. I'm just a big fan. Big fan. I think that's the hard part. I feel like every other sentence I could say, I love this character, I love this character, because I did genuinely really enjoy them all. Except Fennis. We don't like him.
He is a bit.
What is your favorite moment in Legends and Lattes, if you have one?
Favorite moment to write, or that I
Um,
think exists as a moment?
let's go both. Let's go both.
I enjoy writing the fire more than anything else. I like
Mm-hmm.
writing action scenes. I think they're really enjoyable to write.
Yeah.
Um, if I was going to do a favorite moment, um, um, gosh, I think I really like just the last chapter. I like the last chapter where
Mm.
everything kind of it ties up things that I want to tie up. I like the clinching of community and relationship there. I would say that basically the last chapter of Legends was probably my favorite if I was going to talk about like a moment in the books.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a book that you finish and you go, oh, just an audible ah. um, so I was actually going to ask about this with the fire. Was there any temptation, not just with the fire because we had a little taste of it there, but with it being low stakes, was there any temptation to lean into drama, or was it relatively easy to keep it very, very cozy?
Um, I mean, the fire. I think the book is like low stakes. I didn't set out to write something that wouldn't have any stakes.
No, of course.
I just wanted to write something where the stakes didn't feel artificial and that didn't have to involve death, really. And
Mm.
and the fire kind of skirts that. It gets close.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't I didn't think about it, in terms of keeping it within certain bounds because I didn't think
Mhm.
anybody was going to read it anyway. So it was more just for me. Um, I'm not sure if I'm answering this question well or not.
You're doing great.
I didn't really have concerns about it. And if you read the third book, you'll see that I really don't have concerns about it.
I so with the I remember reading the fire and just going, I think I had to close my book a little bit and just go, oh no, oh no. Um, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's so it's not far removed, but it is such a different concept that it kind of makes reading it. You are on your edge of your seat a little bit, even though it is so cozy and so warm, because you're so used to everything going wrong that you're kind of preempting it. And when it doesn't necessarily go the way you expect it, it's so nice. It's really comforting because it is so unexpected. Because I think we're so ingrained, not just with fantasy, but in media and literacy in general, so ingrained to
Raise the
see things
stakes.
go wrong. Mm.
Raise the stakes.
Yeah,
Somebody
exactly.
in peril. Save the
We had
cat.
levels of tension, levels of
Yeah.
tension. Um, and I feel like I'm often at a 5, and I don't want to be at a 5. I want to be at a 2 at all times. Just very, very mellow. So with obviously the writing you've mentioned was hard to. Was it hard to put pen to paper, or was it hard to put pen to paper the way you had kind of envisioned it and do it?
So the first book was the easiest one to write.
Mm.
Um, it's shorter than the others. Um, the plot's fairly straightforward. You sit down and put your butt in a chair and do the words, and that's effort, but it was still easier than all the others. And it took like 26, 27 days to write. I did it in National Novel Writing Month, which is not a terribly long stretch. So it wasn't that terrible. As far as writing goes, it's the most pleasant time I've had writing anything, probably.
Aside from writing, what would you say was the most challenging aspect of creating it? Not just Legends and Lattes, but bookshops as well.
Um, so what ultimately became the most challenging aspect is finding the engine that makes the story go, the little emotional heart of it, that I relate to, that theoretically other people relate to, that you transplant into the characters to make the story function.
Yeah.
So for the second book, I was originally going to write a fantasy murder mystery, a cozy fantasy history. It was basically Murder, She Wrote fantasy, which I thought sounded great. And I had an outline, so I knew all the things that happened in the story. But when it came time to write it, it didn't have that engine in it. It was more about plot. It was more about the things that had to happen. and I had lost sight of the thing that I related to, which made it very difficult for me to care about it.
Mm.
So finding that thing is the challenge for me now. What is this thing that I understand innately about life that I've struggled with that I can relate to my main character also contending with?
Yeah.
And that can be hard to find.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think I mean, the heart of the story is so much based in community in Legends that I don't know how to talk about it without just kind of gushing. Um, I I loved it. Every character you met played such an integral part of the story, and in building Viv's home and her new base and her new
Mhm.
life, that you knew that everybody that, and not everybody, well, yeah, everybody that was given a name, I suppose, was important. And I think it's a really it kind of makes you look at the outer world without getting too philosophical, and realizing how different people have come into your own life and how big of an impact that they've made. I mean, as soon as Tandri came in, I was like, I'm in love. What a perfect woman. But yeah, it's like you said, every character kind of has a counterpart, don't they? In terms of who they would be in life and what their
Yeah.
role is in the story.
I kind of have a rule for myself that if the character has a name, I theoretically they should have enough material to be a main character. There should be,
Mm.
and they should be enough to be somebody's favorite. Otherwise, why are they in the book? Um, and that if I have characters that aren't interesting enough for that, then maybe I combine them and come up with somebody who has more to them.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's a pretty useful rule. It's also maybe informed by audiobooks because the number of times I've had to voice a character who just says yes sir, no sir, and it has no function in the story
Mm.
beyond delivering some lines or exposition. I get tired of storing voice clips for those characters. So I'd rather have all my characters be meaningful and not have to come up with voices for nobodies.
Yeah.
And I think for me that serves the story well because everything is important. It makes you consolidate things into characters rather than spreading them out amongst cardboard cutouts.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't think about it in terms of audiobook duration actually, because obviously there must be books where suddenly there is this one line and they have to have a completely different voice and a
Yep.
completely different mannerism. And yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah. I have book series I read that have 300, 400 unique voices, and most of those voices, the balance of them are not anybody important.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I just have to remember what accent they have and if they're old or young, and so I catalog all that stuff. But
Yeah,
as a narrator and a writer, you really end up thinking about that a lot.
yeah. I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like when you kind of, with voicing, you have to, I mean, obviously you have to make them different. Sorry, I
But
kind
you
of
also have like a limit to your ability to make them different. Like you
yeah,
can only do so many voices. How many 30-year-old people with no personality who are
yeah,
guys who are from the same place can you generate?
yeah,
Um, eh, Especially if you have nothing to go on.
yeah.
And so I just try and solve that problem for myself. And maybe the side benefit. I really am not sure. I'm not sure what motivated me more, not having to do that or the belief that that would create stronger characters. They probably both battled.
I think it's both so valid. I've never thought about it that way in terms of everyone should be able to be a main character, and I think that really really comes across. And I know a lot of our members are aspiring writers as well, and I think that's just a really important. I think that's going to help a lot of people in mindset wise.
One of
It's
the
in my
interesting
mind.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that's a side effect of that is it makes it
Mm.
much easier to have legitimate conversations between your characters. It's really easy if your characters don't have enough raw material for them just to reflect the thoughts of the main character or just to serve to dump lore or, provide
Mm.
exposition. But as soon as they're fully formed enough to sustain their own story, all of a sudden they have opinions. And you understand those opinions and those perspectives, and you put them in the same room with someone else. and better things happen because they have something to talk about.
Yeah. I think that it makes me want to ask so many questions about the characters individually. When you created them, do they all have this, like, did you write a set backstory for or each of them?
No, I didn't actually sit down and write it, but I have enough in my brain. I know what kind of person they are. It doesn't actually have to be events. It's understanding what kind of person they are. You
Yeah.
know, what is important to them? What do they care about? What is their goal? What maybe is in their past that informs that goal? You know, I know the shape of the kind of life that Tandri had. I know the shape of the life that Thimble had. And so if I have to provide details on that, I know what's under the sheet. I know what the furniture looks like under the sheet. I can say, oh, look, I know the shape of their life, and I can fill in details that any details I want that firm up that for a reader if I need to. But just as the author, I know the shape of that, and that's incredibly helpful.
Yeah. I didn't realize that it was a NaNoWriMo project to start with. Did you find that having that kind of deadline of a month helped in any way, or was it more of a...
I'm sure it does. I think I'm a
Yeah.
deadline focused person. And I find deadlines motivating. I really hate to miss them. And I missed my deadline for this book and I was very upset about it. Um, so yeah, I found it very motivating.
Yeah. Did it change? Is the finished product completely from that, or has it been kind of tailored since?
No, the finished, if you read the draft from NaNoWriMo and you read the final, unless you knew what you were looking for, you probably wouldn't know what the difference is. I think I took out about 2,000 words and put about 2,000 words back. 2,000 words of puff and about 2,000 words of some slightly expanded conversations. And I think a scene in the middle of the book where Cal just reaffirms that he's around. So he doesn't feel like he was out of scene for too long. And that's about it. Everything else is tuning of language and just a line edit. So, and so far, all of the books have been that way.
Amazing.
The road really doesn't get torn up, and my outlines are reasonably detailed, so you know what the story is going in.
Yeah.
Now the next book, Watch, will be nothing like that. But so far, three books in, they've all worked that way.
Yeah, I think it's so nice, and I think especially you would think 3 months in, you know the world like the back of your hand. It's like you lived there, I suppose, in a way. In terms of character dynamics and relationships, when did you not realize or decide with Tandri and Viv's relationship, at what point was it no longer platonic?
About halfway through the book. It really didn't change the outline at all, but ultimately because it was supposed to be about a really, really good friendship, like the kind of friendship that I want as an adult. And about halfway through, it became obvious that it was a little bit more than that. It wasn't ever going to be the point of the book, so it doesn't feel like anything more than like a C plot, and that's okay. But about halfway through, it just became obvious that maybe even a little earlier that was what was going to happen.
Yeah, because it definitely wasn't. It didn't feel like a romance book. It felt very much still in this, this cozy world. I think it is definitely gorgeous though, and it was so natural, and I really enjoyed how, like you say, it wasn't the main plot or anything like that. I enjoyed that it just blossomed naturally and just came about. I mean, I'm speaking as a complete Tandri lover, so if she's happy, I'm happy.
Well, I mean, that's what I want out of as an old person now, that's what I want out of a relationship, right? Is one that isn't all about initial attraction and then finding out if you're compatible. It's about having a friendship that evolves into something more, because gosh, that seems like a lot more reliable and much more the kind of relationship that I would want to have.
Yeah, definitely. I think they say, don't they, if your partner can't be your best friend, then who can they be?
Yeah.
No, I love that. I really, really love that. I'm going to ask some more audience questions.
Okay.
Anonymous says, do you have a specific piece of advice for aspiring writers?
Probably a couple, and I'll do them really quick. One is that a simple idea can be a good idea. that it's really easy to get hung up on, I have to write the great American novel. It has to have all these twists. It has to be an idea that's so spectacular and unique that it will stand out amongst all the other ideas. And I think ultimately ideas themselves are kind of cheap. It's all about your personal, what comes out of you that goes into that idea. So any idea you have is going to be really, really boring and awful halfway through. It doesn't matter what it is, you are now bored with it. There's no twist or idea that can survive writing the book that is still going to seem shiny at the end. So simple idea is fine. It's what you put into it. The second one is that if you are trying to write one way and it's not working for you, don't try a different way. I tried to write as a pantser for all of my life. Didn't want to be a plotter. Guess what? I have to be a plotter. So I'm not saying you should do one or the other, but if you've been doing one thing and it's not working, then try the other thing. If you can find a writing buddy, somebody else who will commit to writing at the same time you do, because then at least you have an audience and you have someone else who cares whether you got your words done for the day. It's incredibly helpful. And I mean, I could keep going, but those are good starting pieces. The other one, I guess, is what I mentioned earlier, finding an emotional engine for your book. Find some point in your life where you dithered over a decision, where it was a hard decision. Am I going to go this way or that way? Because you have something really unique in that. One, you have an experience that probably other people have shared. You have an experience that you understand. You know how things went for you, but you also probably spent a lot of hours thinking about how they might have went if you went the other way, which you can write about just as legitimately. And if you can take that moment and you can find a way to twist it and transplant it into another character, then you already have a character arc that you understand. And you already have a very intuitive knowledge of why that's important. I mean, emotionally, what's important about that. And you can have other characters going on parallel journeys or perpendicular journeys or journeys that intersected in some way. And all of a sudden, your book can be alive in a way that allows you to get to the end.
So beautiful. Thank you. No, I think that's it's important to hear. And I think a lot of people, or at least personally, it's so easy to forget all of that, in terms of it's so easy to criticize your own work and to be your own worst critic and put yourself down before you've even begun.
Yeah.
I like the idea of a writing buddy. That's real. I like that a lot. I think a lot of people will benefit from that. And did you have
I definitely did. I did and do. Yep, I did. Yep.
And I feel like it just, like I said, I need that external force. So maybe writing buddy is the way for me.
Just somebody caring if you finish.
Yeah, definitely. I could think of a couple of people off the top of my head, so perhaps I'll send them a text later tonight. Anonymous says, do you have any plans for books outside of the Legends and Lattes world?
Yes, probably the next book I write is outside of it. Yeah, I have several. I don't want to write the same kind of books for the rest of my life. And while I'm happy to write more Legends and Latte stuff, as long as I've got the right story and the right people I want to talk about, I have other things I want to write too. So ideally next month I will start working on the first one that's outside. So we'll see how that goes.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Especially when the story becomes so important to you, you don't want to force anything to happen or write it because you feel the need to. I think once it could, and you can always, I feel like as a reader, you can always tell when a story has come from someone's heart or because of that's what they've been asked to do. So I like that. I like that. Well, respecting your own interests, I suppose, and putting yourself and your I was going to say sanity. It's not sanity is not the word that I was thinking of, but I hope that
well-being. I don't know.
yeah. I think putting yourself first. I think that's an important thing in general. I feel like I'm really rambling. I'm sorry.
No.
We've got, hi Travis. Thimble's recipes are lovely. Do you bake? If not, where did the inspiration for his craft come from? Also, what is your favorite snack when reading?
So I am not much of a baker. I like baked goods, but I try not to eat too many of them. But I love the way that they smell. I love cinnamon rolls. If I was going to eat a baked good, it would be a scone. Scones are my weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no, I'm not a baker. Not really. I like to cook. Um, so most of the, and honestly, I think you'll probably see it in most of the descriptions. Most of the inspiration for baked goods and legends and lattes is from scents, because that's another thing you're always finding in coffee shops. And I think that a lot of people can't picture things, but most people can remember how things smell.
Yeah.
So I find that scents are a real shortcut to recognition. They certainly are for me. I have really good scent memory, so I remember what things smell like, and that encapsulates a moment for me. So I kind of end up going that direction. So yeah, food is a very straightforward way to talk via scent.
I think that comes across so well as well. I think that's what makes everybody so hungry, is that you can smell it. You can smell it as you're reading. Yeah, I think initially, like when Thimble first appeared, and came to work in the shop, I think it was literally saliva, pure saliva. And then what is your favorite snack when you read?
Oh gosh. That's hard. That's hard. Especially since I'm on a diet. Um,
Apples.
uh, God, God. Do I snack when I read? Um, so right now, the snack that I have the most often is like there's these like really thin Ritz crisp things. They're really low calorie, and I take cottage cheese and I put everything bagel seasoning on it and some pepper oil, and that, and I eat that, and it's really good. But so that's what I'm gonna say, because now I can't think of anything else.
I mean, it sounds to me. I can't find anything but the bagels, everything but the bagel seasoning over here. When I was in drama school, my friend was from America and she brought a load back with her. And honestly, I miss it so much.
That's good stuff.
It is. It is. We don't know what we're missing unless you've tried it, and then you really know what you're missing, and you can't get it. It's very sad. I'm sure you could. There's a recipe to make it somewhere.
Yeah, I don't think it's too complicated, but
No.
still, having to make it is more of a pain than being able to just get
Yeah.
it.
At least you'd get loads of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Do you play D&D?
I do not actively play in D&D. I played it in high school, but I never really had a group after that. It's a lot of work to get a group, to be able to go to a group, and I just never was able to make it work. So I played a lot of digital D&D, like video games, Baldur's Gate, whatever. I've played plenty of that, but I don't have a live group. I did a one-shot live at a book festival like a year or two ago, but that was the last time I played.
Yeah, I am. It can be so difficult, can't it? I'm starting a campaign in like 2 weeks, and it already took about a whole day to decide a day when we're free. So I don't know how long it's going to
Yeah,
last. But
that's a lot of
yeah,
scheduling.
there's only 4 of us. I don't
That's a
understand.
lot of people to get to be available at the same
Yeah.
time.
Oh, it's so annoying. But I would you say that your knowledge of either playing video games or in creative video games, did that help with the world building and the character arcs and stuff?
I don't know if it helped with the world building, the character arcs, and video game development. I was never really a story developer, and I always downplayed story for the most part in the games that I built. But it probably is recognizable to people who play, that I have familiarity. It's like it's a language that I understand, as probably what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Danielle says, what drew you to cozy fantasy and why do you think it appeals to readers so much in the past few years? Do you think it's a remedy to things such as the pandemic?
I didn't know that cozy fantasy was a thing when I wrote it. And I think that moniker got stapled to it afterwards. So I was drawn to it because it was what I wanted at the time, because it was middle of COVID, and it was just the kind of thing I wanted to read. I wanted to read something where everything was okay at the end. And I, if it's a remedy or not, I think it's something that, what's that? I think it's important to be able to feel okay when you want to. especially these days.
Yeah.
So any tool that's available that lets you do that, I think, has got a lot of value. And I think it's also, depending on the book, like a connective thing. It's a way of seeing other people and being less lonely and sharing experiences that other people have. I think cozy fantasy is a good way of using the trappings of fantasy to remind us that everyday things are important, which I think most of us need. We do all this stuff. You read about people slaying dragons. That's really exciting, but I'm never going to do that. I'm not going to connect with anybody else over that. And it doesn't make me feel better about what I do every day. But
Mhm.
if you use fantasy to talk about your relationships and your job and things that you experience in your actual life, and to help you to have the perspective that this matters, I think that that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I love that. I am with fantasy. I think that's what I was going to say. Was I really do think Legends and Lattes helped to trailblaze the cozy fantasy genre, and I think it's just so. It is a really refreshing take, and I think. I mean, it's like I said before, isn't it? You get so used to things being a certain way that when
Yeah,
something comes and changes your perspective, you really want more. It's like you need more for your soul. It's very soul warming,
yeah,
um, especially for people I think who grew up with fantasy. And I guess it's something to be said about when you see the world falling apart around you. You don't want to read about worlds falling apart,
no,
no
I
matter how much you love it.
and I think cozy fantasy has existed for a long time. I think Terry
Mhm.
Pratchett is pretty arguably a lot of cozy fantasy. It uses
Mhm.
fantasy to talk about people,
Mhm.
and the wit is different, and it's often concerned with kind of like bigger, like human ideas.
Mhm.
But then also every Studio Ghibli movie, okay, not all of them, but like 70%
Mhm.
of them, the ones that aren't harrowing,
Yeah.
are kind of that sort of gentle, cozy fantasy.
Mhm.
They're not without splinters and prickles,
Mhm.
which helps make them feel genuine.
Yeah.
And but they're ultimately pretty affirming, and they're using fantasy in that way.
Yeah. I think it's telling, isn't it, that I mean, I know that the majority of what I did during lockdown actually was watching and rewatching a lot of Studio Ghibli films,
Yeah,
because it does just make you feel warm, and it's so easy to just put on and kind of, it's escapism, isn't it? It's
yeah,
escapism without trepidation.
yeah. And there's, I think, a lot of manga, a lot of slice of
Mm.
life manga that I think really squarely has occupied that realm for quite a long time. Um, but not so much, not as much in book form, I think.
No, I would agree. I would agree. You see it, like I've read a lot of like uh, magical girl manga growing up,
Yeah,
and yeah, actually, aside from perhaps children's books or books for young teens, you don't see it much in adult form.
yeah,
Um, but the part of me that loved those books when I was younger never went away. And so it's nice
yeah.
to be able to pick that up now and to actually still find things that I loved when I was younger and still have love for those, but also new things that represent me better as an adult.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think it's really beautiful, and I'm so happy that there is more of this medium coming out, because it's nice to feel good.
It is nice to feel good.
Yeah, it's nice to feel good, and it's nice to escape in a world that's not quite your own, but similar enough that you feel at home there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I could go on about this for hours because I think it's just so makes you nice and warm, especially in winter. What have I got here? Could you talk us through your experience of publication, please?
So I'll give you it in brief, but also I wrote it all up. So
Mm.
on my website at travisbaldree.com, there's a link to self-publishing A to Z. So if you really want an in-depth thing, go there and click on that, because it's goes
Amazing.
through everything. But it was relatively straightforward. I wrote the book, decided I was going to self-publish because I work with so many indie authors. I figured I would like to learn how it works. And I initially self-published through Kindle Desktop Publishing and Amazon. And also I did print books through Ingram Spark, which is a service that's run by Ingram, who's like the biggest book distributor in the States and maybe internationally, I don't know, that lets you do print-on-demand books in a way that actual brick-and-mortar bookstores can potentially order them in, because it has wholesale discounts and allows for returns, which Amazon does not. And I bartered with a author friend of mine who I narrate for. She did an edit on the book in exchange for me narrating a book for her. I laid it all out in Vellum, which is an ebook and print publishing application for Mac that a lot of people use to do the layout for their books after investigating a lot of other things. And I commissioned artwork for the cover and did the art direction for that. And was really happy with the cover that came out of it. And I posted that on Twitter, and Shannon Aguirre retweeted it. And then all of a sudden, a lot of people were interested in the book just based on the cover, but nobody had read it. So I turned on pre-orders and got a lot of pre-orders. And then people got the book and people liked the book. And it was a very successful indie launch, I think, by probably any metric. And I was blown away and and surprised by it. And then within a few weeks, I was contacted by 3 agents about potentially taking it traditional, and chose one based on vibes entirely and said, why not? Why don't I see what the difference between the two is? And then within, I don't know, 48 hours, Tor had made an offer, and I did a traditional publishing deal. So I did both sides, and they will both have their own merits.
Yeah. I love hearing and reading about everyone's different journeys into publishing. I don't think I've read 2 of the same story. It's all so different. And you think about how many authors there are out there. It's fascinating. It really goes to show that there really isn't one way to do it.
Definitely not. And I think the ways are constantly opening and closing. One person's route in doesn't exist anymore, but a new one is probably opening up.
Yeah.
I think that what I have to thank for a lot of the original proliferation of the book is basically TikTok and BookTube, BookTok, all the other book prefixed social media, groupings. Because other people got out and pushed. They're the ones that actually said, hey, I read this and I liked it, and you should read it too. And I'm very thankful for that, and can't pretend I had anything to do with it.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Marketing is amazing, but word of mouth is the most powerful marketing tool that there is.
Yeah. And I think that publishers realize this at this point, I think ultimately, and I think you see them basically just pushing their chips onto things that are already working to try and maximize them, rather than trying to get something to cross above the water level.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really nice to hear so many stories about people who have published independently. I know that me and my friend were at Comic-Con not too long ago, and Ingram Spark had a whole stall there, encouraging people to come over and, do you have a book that you want to write? And really helping and putting themselves out there to kind of bring up this new generation of authors and encourage you to put it out there, see what happens. I think it's really nice. Especially, I feel like a lot of the ways in can feel quite alien. What you kind of expect and these preconceived ideas of what publishing is, that it is really enlightening and really nice to hear about how many different avenues there are and how many different avenues work for people.
Being able to self-publish these days, and for it to not have the stink that it once had of vanity publishing, is incredibly powerful. I mean, there's just not a gatekeeper now. As long as you are willing to learn about things that you don't already know, there's nothing really getting in your way of attempting to publish. That doesn't guarantee you anything, but you can publish, and this didn't used to be a possibility at all.
And especially, there's so many nice ways into being able to have a physical copy of your own book as well. It's
so easy to do now. It's so easy to do now.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? You could put your book out there, someone will read it, someone somewhere will read your book. And I think that's what stops a lot of people. Even if you don't want people to read your book, you have written a book, and that is amazing in itself. And hard to remember sometimes. Like, it's a huge achievement. let
Yeah,
alone three.
it's a big if you finish, it's such a big deal. Congratulations.
Definitely. Anna says, hi, I love that so many of your characters are female and not in a typical strong female lead or background character way. What made you choose to include so many interesting female characters?
I have a rule, which is that by default, all characters are female unless there's a reason for them to be male, because it's been the opposite for so long. So that's just my default rule. And sometimes it's just for variety, it has to be male, or sometimes it's because I think this character specifically works better from a male perspective. And then you're not choosing to write a character because they're female and trying to make them sound female or something. They're just people. And I find that really helpful.
The chat went crazy then. Did you see all the emojis? Everybody loved that. I think that's so nice. That's such a refreshing take on it and a way to look into it. Because you're right. I think particularly in the fantasy world, it has generally been a very male protagonist heavy space.
Good Lord, yes.
Yeah.
And the perspective is, if you go back and read like any fantasy from like the 90s to the 2000s, it's almost like getting slapped just because the perspective is so a little skeezy, let's face it. It's really, really weird. And it's amazing how fast perspectives have updated. And there's no reason to go back to the bad old days.
I can't remember. I mean, I do remember which book. I'm not going to name the book. It was a particular fantasy book, which I love the series of. However, there is one female character who was my favorite, but suddenly she was there and then she was topless and then everyone was talking about it and then laughing. I was like, oh, why?
Why? Yeah.
Why not? And then they moved on. They just moved on. I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. That's okay. But no, it is a breath of fresh air from the books of the 90s and early 2000s. And that's the thing, isn't it? Again, it comes back to except for children's books or books for young teens. Yeah. Female adults deserve something.
Characters should just be people. They should be people.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be, if you described their breasts first to tell who they were, you probably made a mistake.
Yeah, I would think so. If you describe their breasts in general, I would think really, if you spend more than one line on it,
yep,
maybe not the whole focus of the book.
Nope.
Hi, Travis. You say that you outline your book as your starting point for writing, but as an aspiring fantasy writer, what does that look like? Was it difficult to know where to start, e.g., plot, world building, character profiles, etc.?
So I don't really write down much material. Here's the things that I have when I write an outline. I write a brief thing about each of the main characters. It's just like, here's who they are, and this is their journey. This is how they change over the course of the book. They start here, and ultimately, by the end of the book, they've had this realization, or they've changed in this fundamental way, or their perspective's been updated, or whatever. Or this is what they want, and this is how they get it. And then I write linearly, chapter by chapter, until the story is concluded. And every chapter, the outline is basically normal text. I can't do like bullet points or anything. So it's basically a summation of what happened in the chapter, like I'm telling somebody the story in brief, like I'm sitting across from somebody. It has to make sense to say aloud, because it forces me to find logical problems in a chapter that I otherwise wouldn't find until I got halfway through writing the chapter. And because I hate rewriting things, that's normally where I would stall out. If I've written 800 words of a chapter and all of a sudden I figured out that somebody's not where they're supposed to be, and now I'm going to have to rewrite the chapter to make that work, I just want to put it down and run away. So I need to pre-solve those problems. And so using the outline to air those out and figure them out at a high level lets me get through the book.
Did you find that when writing linearly that there was ever anything that you did kind of step back and go, I don't know where I'm going from here? Or did it come very easily?
I don't know if I had to step back. Sometimes it's just hard to think about what comes next, and to force yourself to do the thing that comes next. But I try to always write a chapter that changes something. If nothing changed by the end of the chapter, then there was no point to the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And if a moment is mundane but could have been more interesting, both either in the setting or in the circumstances of events, but I want to make it interesting instead of mundane. So, you know, if somebody arrives in a town and they meet someone, well, what could be interesting about that town? What would make it stick in my mind? And what could be interesting about that meeting that would make it stick in my mind? And at the end of the chapter, why do I want to keep reading to the next chapter? What's the question that I'm posed that I want an answer to? And I'm not sure that I think about it in precisely that way at the moment that I'm writing it, but that's underneath what I want to be happening.
Yeah. And in terms of just a general question, really, and how do you feel about cliffhangers? Are you a fan of cliffhangers, or do you try and, I mean, suppose reading and writing?
I'm a big fan of chapter cliffhangers, as long as I have the next chapter.
Yes.
I'm not a big fan of book cliffhangers because books take too long to come out and I can't remember what happened to the book anyway. I like completed stories, so I'm not a huge fan of ongoing series where a book doesn't really do anything but move the plot along and doesn't complete anything for me, because I never get a chance to go back and read anything. So I like completed stories. So all the cliffhangers you want in the middle.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm going to get an answer to those cliffhangers.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what's so nice as well, is that I feel like, especially in the book world, whenever you get a cliffhanger, it can be a year, 2, 3 years before you get the answer to that. In chapters, it's exciting because you think you're going to go to bed, but you can't go to bed.
No, we got to find out what happens.
Know what happens. But book-wise, it can get, I agree, it can get a bit too much. Anna says, are you planning to do more books within this series? And do you have any recommendations outside of your own lovely books, maybe that inspired you?
I think it's probably likely I will write some more Legends and Lattes books after I get, another book that's outside of the bounds. And I say this now, I may sit down to write and all of a sudden some other idea comes along and that's what I have to do. So it's hard for me to say. As far as recommendations outside of it, I really like T. Kingfisher. I think T. Kingfisher is fabulous. Thornhedge, Nettle and Bone, Paladin's Grace. She also writes some horror that's really fabulous. Really like T. Kingfisher. That's what I'll say.
Perfect. Cozy fantasy seems to be on the rise. How do you see the genre evolving, and where do you think it might be headed in the next few years?
It definitely does seem like there's a lot of cozy fantasy coming about. As far as evolving, I assume that people are just going to they're going to bend the genre to fit new stories. I hope so. I don't like the idea of genres that become really prescribed by rules. Like you must do this, 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 and this, and that's no longer cozy fantasy, or that is. I find it hard to care about that kind of thing. I'm not really interested in genre limitations or feeling like I have to write one sort of thing. I'm happy to have more people writing stories, period,
Yeah.
I just want to read stories about people. I want to read stories about people that I can relate to, that I'm interested in.
Yeah, there is no prescribed algorithm, is there? It's really what you do with it. And I think a lot of the time you can set out to write something and maybe the genre that you thought it was isn't what the finished product is, or what people have received it as. So I think I know there's a lot of, in terms of like cozy books, like cozy crime is also, I mean, cozy books in general are really popular right now. Cozy crime, I've read a lot of cozy crime that went into really graphic detail. That you would almost go, it's not very
cozy.
But it still feels on the whole very cozy. I love genre bending and reading kind of books that tread the boundaries a little bit and push the boundaries as well. I hope to see a lot more cozy fantasy. I think as well, because it's such a non-specific genre. I mean, fantasy is so broad in general. Adding coziness into the mix, it just opens up so many doorways. And I think, I'm really excited to read more. Whether that be in Legends and Lattes, or whether that be anything really. I love books. What can I say?
Exactly. More books is always good.
Yes, definitely. Any books, any books. Did you intentionally include specific themes or key messages to explore in the books? If so, can you elaborate, please?
I mean, the intentional themes that I included were the ones that I already related to or that felt important to me. So, I mean, Legends and Lattes is about somebody in their 40s who decides they don't want to do the job they've spent their whole life learning to do. So they move to another city and they start a new career, and then they find a community that they didn't know was waiting for them. And I did that as someone who did the same job into their 40s and decided they didn't want to do it anymore and moved to a new city and started a new career narrating audiobooks and found this really welcoming community. So it all felt very close to me. And so thematically, I'm just kind of trying to include stuff that I understand. The second book is about mistakes that we make that turn out to not be mistakes, that are like foundational to the people that we ultimately become. Which felt really relevant because the book itself was even the positive outcome of a lot of prior mistakes. And the book that I just wrote is about the particular guilt of feeling like you're disappointing people that you know and learning how to say no, which feels really relevant to me.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just whatever feels relevant to me right now. I'm probably just at the whim of my current personal experience.
And I think it's funny, isn't it? Because I feel like, especially with personal circumstances for everyone, you always kind of feel like you're alone in that. But it just goes to show that there's such relatability in talking about, or at least manifesting your feelings into something else and realizing that, oh, hey, actually, I feel this way too. Or someone else is like, I feel that way. And it's just kind of being seen and heard. And yeah. So yeah, keep on writing about it, please. With you said that you tried to dive into writing in the past. Was it always fantasy, or was it anything else?
The question was if I had considered writing in other genres. Is that right?
Yes, when you wrote previously, or
Yeah.
found it hard to write previously, was it always fantasy that you'd intended to write?
I mean, I wrote some sci-fi and horror too. I've completed a few short stories and a novella. And there's sci-fi and horror in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like speculative fiction in general. Don't I don't have that much interest in just kind of traditional. I like to read lit fic, but I don't have any interest in writing it for whatever reason. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, isn't it? I feel like fantasy, horror, and sci-fi all tend to kind of branch into each other in various parts. And I think a lot of the time they do kind of tread, I keep saying tread the boundary or push the boundary, but they do kind of cross into each other. And so I think it's very understandable that they would be the ones that you kind of like speculative in general. Same with litfic. I feel like I'm very comfortable as a reader in fantasy and in speculative fiction. That I guess litfic, I don't really want to read about the world that I'm in. I've had enough of it on my day to day. I don't want to be here. I want to just escape. Although this year I have, with the book club especially, read much more than I would usually pick up, and it really has opened my eyes. So potentially I don't have a favorite genre anymore, which is interesting. Enough about me. I'll carry on asking you questions. Melissa says, what are you reading at the minute, if you're reading anything?
Gosh, well, nothing that I am not being paid to read aloud, because I just have not had time. All of my time has either been wrapping up the book, going through edits, or trying to stay on top of my daily work schedule. I love to read for pleasure, but I've had very little time to do it recently. So that's my terrible, terrible, terrible answer. I get asked to blurb a lot too, and I just can't right now.
No, not at all. Your Goodreads must look great in terms of how many books you've read in the year.
I never even bother to put them on, and a lot of the narration work I do is for web serials that have been converted into books, so they don't tend to fit into the same boxes that a lot of other books do.
Yeah, I think in terms of audiobook narration, I mean, I assume the rule of thumb is you read before you work, right?
You would think so, and theoretically that is the best practice, but that
Yeah.
is not what I do.
And that's when the one character with the one line comes on and you go, oh man.
Well, no, I mean, so I have my process of preparing for a book, and a lot of it involves, especially since I do fantasy and stuff, word searches through the document for a lot of keywords like accent or brogue or whatever. And also for all of the weird made up names, because spell check is really great at finding those because none of them are in the dictionary. And so I gather all of my information on what needs to be pronounced and find out who the main characters are and what sort of voices they need. But I don't have to like exhaustively read the book to do that. And I'm a good cold reader. And really, I just don't have time.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that I read so many series, and once you've started a series, you kind of have the bones of it. You may need to know a few more characters as you go, as they get introduced. You may need some new pronunciations. But by and large, it's not that big of a deal. The amount of time I save by not exhaustively pre-reading and making notes on all of these books, if I actually messed up a character and had to re-record a few lines, still the time savings would be astronomical. So it just makes more sense for me to do it this way. But that doesn't mean that you should if you're out there getting into audiobook narration. Don't do as I do as you should. I've found it works for me given the kinds of things that I narrate.
Yeah.
If I was narrating historical fiction, for instance, which had very specific characters from very specific dialects, from very specific places with very specific pronunciations, my prep would be different than what it is for what I usually read. So it's kind of caters to what you do.
Yeah. Do you tend to get, so with, I mean, like you said, fantasy names can be interesting to look at. What would you say in terms of reading? I don't even know. I know what I'm trying to say. I just can't word it properly. This one isn't scripted. It's off book. With the name pronunciations, do you find that you have to question it a lot? Do you get in touch with the author, or do you kind of just
depends
and go for it?
Some authors at the front say just pronounce it however you want, and then I'll just do it intuitively what I think is right. Some it's more specific, and I will provide them a list with a phonetic pronunciation of what I think it is, and then I ask them to just tell me any that they don't agree with, because it's way easier than trying to get them to articulate it. I'll say, here's how I think it should be pronounced. You correct me any place I'm wrong. And a lot of times they'll just rubber stamp it and say, yep, that's great. And that's fine with me. But maybe there's just one or two that they wish were pronounced a different way. That's usually how I handle it. And then there's the ones where the author gives me names that don't have any vowels in them, and I'm just going to do whatever I want.
How was naming in terms of reading so many fantasy books with such wild and wonderful spellings and names? Did you, in writing your books, were there any that you wanted to go a bit crazier with, or from experience? Just I
like simple, pronounceable names that I think evoke some of the character of the person, and that are also distinct enough so that you're never confused about who is who. So I prefer simpler names that hopefully are evocative.
Yeah, I think that came across as well. It was really nice to not kind of go.
Yeah, I don't want a lot of apostrophes in there.
No. Lots of B's and M's. I mean, I'm one to talk. My name does not look like my name. But maybe that gives me right to talk. I don't know.
It does.
Hannah says, please can we get a thimble cookbook?
It's been asked that's been asked for quite a few times. So I don't know. Maybe someday if somebody really wants to put together a bunch of recipes for me, but I won't be able to do it.
You can describe the smells and then someone can write the recipe.
I'll describe the smells and come up with them. Yeah.
And name them, of course. Base them on something and then you can give them a name.
Perfect.
What do you hope readers take away from the books?
It was something I kind of touched on earlier, that I think that everyday things matter. That the things that we all go through as people are what really matter. Those are the things that we actually are going to be doing and contending with for our lives. So just the reminder that they're worthy of caring about.
Yeah. I think that kind of goes into this question. Do you think having so many characters, particularly in fantasy books, is a result of gaming and all the characters that are needed?
Do you mean, I'm not sure if I understand this question. So many characters, do you mean so many characters in like they have a large cast?
I think so. I think that's what the intention was. Yeah. Do you think so many characters, particularly in fantasy books? Yeah, I think the idea of NPCs
Mm-hmm.
in games in terms of
Um,
fantasy.
to be honest, I think that a lot of the Moorishness in fantasy books has to do with desperately wanting you to believe that the world is real. It's why
Mhm.
people get into their monetary systems in their fantasy world and want to tell you all about the magic system and all the particulars of how people get food and all
Mhm.
of these little details because we desperately want you to believe that this place is real. And I think that there's a real, for me, it's kind of an uncanny valley situation. The more needless detail you toss at me, the less likely I am to believe you because I only have to poke holes in one of those things for me to not believe any of it.
Yeah.
Um, so I usually feel like I just desperately want you to believe this place is real. Look at how many people there are. I can mention the 572 people that live in this city and tell you all about their ancestry. So it
Mhm.
must be real. And that actually is counterproductive for me. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It can be really hard as well, especially if you find that the world very much exists in your head. I imagine it'd be exhausting to have that much in there. And in terms of characters, if there were like, say, 600 people, your head must never be quiet.
yeah, I don't want to have to consult my notes every time I want to
Yeah.
write a scene. And maybe that just makes me lazy. It's quite possible that just makes me lazy. But I find that I don't gravitate toward that kind of storytelling anymore
Mm.
either. There was a time where I was also so desperate to believe that this place was real and that I could just wake up there that maybe I wanted that detail. Oh my God, it has a glossary that's 40 pages long. Yes, please. But now I don't have any interest in a glossary. I just want to care about the people in the story, not all of the trappings that the story is told within. And that's not to say that some people shouldn't like that. Absolutely. Whatever works for you works for you. That's just not personally what I respond to anymore.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's what works for people, isn't it? And everyone's so individual that I feel like the more I read and the more I look into things to kind of get a thing of like how to do this, how to do that, but actually there isn't. It comes back to the publishing. There is no one way to do it.
No. No,
No,
people want
definitely.
different kinds of stories. People have different kinds of needs out of the stories, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And the way you write it, in a lot of ways, it's like writing a story is like writing a letter to people you don't know.
Yeah.
You can either write the letter very broadly, so that anybody can read it and understand what you're talking about, but it probably can't be that deep
Yeah.
because how can you write something very detailed that everybody's going to respond to? On the other end of the spectrum, you can write something specifically for one exact person. And if that one person reads this letter, that's for them. But everybody else is kind of a little out in the cold. But
Yeah.
there's some middle ground where you can write a letter that is going to be read and received and understood by a reasonable number of people. Can't be everybody, but a pretty wide number of people that still has enough depth to mean something to them, which
Hmm.
is where I kind of want to aim the letter that I'm writing.
Yeah.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with writing any of those kinds of letters. It's just what kind of letter do you want to write to people?
Yeah, definitely. I am in terms of with reviews and feedback and fan feedback, in terms of, I suppose, Goodreads and just online in general, do you tend to read it or do you kind of stay away from it?
I read it up to a certain point, at which point I've
Mhm.
read enough. I'm not. I made video games for decades. My skin is asbestos. I have received the vilest notes that you could possibly imagine. Readers are nothing like that. And I think it partially it's because reading is basically an empathetic act.
Yeah.
It's not about you, it's about connecting to something else, somebody else's experience. But games are not. Games are ultimately like a selfish act. They're about my personal experience and what makes me feel good.
Hmm.
So I think inherently books are just more empathetic. There are people who don't like Legends and Lattes. That's fine. There are people that doesn't work for. That's fine. Those were not the people that I wrote the letter to. Now,
No.
sometimes though, there's stuff that I want in there. This is the person that I wanted to write the letter to, but something about this didn't work for them. And I find reviews are useful for finding out that kind of information. I tried to do this And this person was the exact sort of person who should have received it, but something I did got in the way. And am I interested in changing that?
Mm.
Maybe, maybe not. But that feedback is useful for me making that decision. Somebody who says, gosh, you wrote a fantasy novel and it doesn't, nobody even dies. I'm not interested in this. Well, then it doesn't matter. I'm
Yeah.
okay, fine. I'm not writing for you. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But someone else might have a legitimate thought about the way that a characters are portrayed, or like I was attempting something and it didn't land for them. And I want to know. So I read reviews after a certain critical mass and you're gone past the book. It's not like I'm going to go back and rewrite it. But I do want to know how people felt about it. And I'm okay with them not liking it.
Yeah, definitely. Anonymous has kind of also come into this. Thanks for the great Q&A, Travis, first of all. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome and when starting a new project? And if so, how do you combat it?
All the time, every day, forever. So yes. I always have imposter syndrome. I've never not had it. I have always felt that everybody else knows the rules and I don't, and I'm just trying to catch up. And that at any time someone is going to find out that I have no idea what I'm doing. I still feel that way. I feel that way about the next book that I just wrote. I don't know how to combat it. Time and exposure is, I think, probably the most likely thing. I don't tend to feel that about audiobook narration anymore. Some of it is probably just because I've narrated so damn many audiobooks at this point that there's just not any room left over for worrying about it. But there certainly was a long period where I did have imposter syndrome. Still absolutely do about writing.
Yeah, it completely makes you human though, doesn't it? I mean, it grounds you in a way.
Yeah, I mean, you're ultimately, I think all of us feel that way. I think largely most of us feel like everybody else was given the rules ahead of time, but we weren't. And we're just bumbling around pretending and hoping nobody catches on that we didn't get the handout before class until we can just figure it out and not stand out. I think that's a pretty common feeling.
Yeah, and it's also a feeling that nobody talks about. It's such a, I think it's so private, because then you don't want to be the person that says, I don't know what's going on and I'm just figuring it out as it goes. You also, there's this kind of energy of, as a person, wanting to feel and show that you're put together and that you, of course, you know everything, and you, I don't know.
Clearly.
Makes sense? I hope that makes sense.
And you know, the more you know, the less you know,
Yeah, definitely. There's so many little adages and idioms and stuff that sums it up. But I think it's really lovely to hear. In a way, I'm sorry you feel that way, but also it's really nice to hear that you feel that way.
Well, I think there's like bands of it too. Like you go through, it's like descending through layers of water and bands of temperature. Up here in the shallows, yes, there's a big band, and I don't know very much, and I'm afraid everybody knows I don't know very much. And then I start to know something, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm not worried about any of the things I was worried before, but now I've discovered this whole new world and all of these details I wasn't even aware of back then. And I know that there is a smaller slice of people who know a lot about this, and now I feel an imposter compared to them.
Yeah.
And eventually you pass through that band of water and you know all of that stuff and you feel comfortable. And then you discover there's a whole other realm of people who are even more specifically attuned to details you, again, weren't even aware of, and now you don't know anything again. And I think that just happens over and over and over again as you descend through these layers of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I don't think that's ever going to stop either. I don't think that is a top to reach. I think it's kind of, you see upwards and you see the I can't think of the word, the top of a mountain, the summit, the peak,
the summit.
The summit's the opposite way, isn't it? I don't know. Anyway,
the summit's the top. Yeah.
And you can see it, but it's like as you climb, it tends to go a little bit further up, and I don't think there is anyone at the top. I think everyone just pretends they're at the top.
Yeah,
everyone feels that way. Yeah,
and hopefully you get to a certain point where you have gone to a certain level where you're like, oh, there's only like 20 people here, and maybe I'm not an expert, but at least all those people down there, at least I know what they are on about. So maybe you can come to terms with it after you have been through that a few times.
Definitely. And I've just got 2 more questions. So
Okay.
Anonymous says, what's your opinion on immersive audiobooks?
I think they're cool, but they're not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was never a radio play person. I know a lot of people love sound effects and music and multicast with their audiobooks. It's just not my personal preference. I like one person telling me a story and doing everything they can with their voice. And I found those sound effects and audio a little distracting. And they're so long, I think it's hard to do the production at an incredibly high level of quality. There's stuff out there like the Star Wars stuff that is at an incredibly high level of quality, but it's just not my particular preference. But I think they're cool and I have absolutely nothing against them.
Yeah, no, definitely. So it kind of ties. So I said two. I have a second question that kind of ties in with the third question. Were there any fantasy elements or creatures you left out of the book that you'd like to explore in the future? And is it something that you have in store already?
I really plan to talk about like the magic system and all kinds of stuff in the second book that I didn't write. It was integral to the plot. I have a rule that unless the characters care about the thing, they're not allowed to talk about it. So I don't get to expound on it, and nobody else is going to talk about it unless it would matter to them.
Yeah.
And so far, none of the characters have given a shit. So I have not gotten a chance to talk about it. So I hope to, as long as it makes sense in the context of the story. I really hate info dumps.
Yeah.
So we will see. We will
Yeah.
see. And I get little bits and bobs tucked in every once in a while, but yeah, I get to show a little bit more of the world, a little bit more of the creatures of the world in the next book. But it's still, again, only what they encounter.
Yes, as it should be, sticking true. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I mean, I suppose it's today for you. What time is it where you are actually?
1 PM.
Oh wow. Yeah. 9 PM.
Perfect.
So thank you so much for spending your day/evening with us, and for everyone that came. I am so looking forward to the next book, and I'm even more so looking forward to seeing what you do outside of Thune and outside of this world that you've created. I'm very interested. You'll have at least one reader, so don't worry about that.
That's all I need, I guess. That's all I need.
Thank you so much. I really can't thank you enough. It's been wonderful. I hope you've had as much of a nice time as we have. It's been so lovely chatting to you, and I know it's meant a lot to everyone who's read your book. And yeah, just thank you so much. I appreciate the ability.
Thank you for reading. Thank you for all the questions.
Of course. No, thank you so much. I keep saying thank you. I can't thank you enough. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. And
you too.
I really can't wait to see what's in store next. Really can't wait.
Thank you.
Thanks, Travis.
Have a good night, everybody.
Night. Bye.
Bye.